The rain pelted down mercilessly as Zach Bennett hunched over the steering wheel of his aging Honda Civic, the windshield wipers fighting a losing battle against the downpour. His knuckles whitened as he gripped the wheel, calculating how much the repair on the leaking roof would cost money he simply didn't have. "Daddy, I'm hungry," came the small voice from the back seat. 5-year-old Emma sat strapped in her booster seat, clutching the worn stuffed rabbit he'd managed to save from their old life. "I know, sweetheart. We're almost home. I'll make your favorite mac and cheese, okay?" Zach forced cheerfulness into his voice, though his stomach clenched at the reminder that the cupboards at home were nearly bare. Tomorrow was payday, but tonight would be tight. The headlights caught something, or rather someone on the roadside ahead. A figure in a dark coat was struggling to maintain balance on the slippery shoulder, one hand raised half-heartedly to flag down help. Zach's first instinct was to drive past. It was nearly 11 p.m. He was exhausted after his double shift at the construction site, followed by his evening job at the gas station. And he had Emma with him. But something made him slow down. Maybe it was the way the figure seemed to be limping, or maybe it was simply that he knew what it felt like to need help and have no one stop. "Just a minute, Em," he said, pulling over carefully. He rolled down his window just enough to call out, "Do you need help?" But not enough to let the rain pour in. The figure hurried, or rather limped, toward his car. As she came into the glow of his headlights, Zach could see it was a woman, probably in her early 30s. Her expensive-looking coat was soaked through, her dark hair plastered to her face. "Thank you for stopping," she said, her voice carrying a hint of an accent he couldn't place. "My car went off the road about half a mile back. I was trying to reach a gas station or something." Zach hesitated. "Get in," he finally said, unlocking the doors. "You're soaked." "Thank you," she said again, relief evident in her voice as she climbed into the passenger seat. "I didn't think anyone would stop in this weather." "Who's that, Daddy?" Emma asked from the back seat. "This lady had car trouble, Em," Zach explained. "We're going to help her." The woman turned, seeming startled to see a child in the car. "Oh, hello there," she said, her tone softening immediately. "Hi," Emma replied shyly. "I'm Emma, I'm 5. "It's very nice to meet you, Emma. I'm Phoebe." She turned back to Zach. "I really appreciate this." "I tried calling for help, but there's no cell service out here." Zach nodded. "The valley blocks the signal. There's coverage once we get to town." He glanced at her. "I'm Zach, by the way, Zach Bennett." "Phoebe Zanetti," she replied. As she shifted in her seat, she winced. "Are you hurt?" Zach asked, concern edging his voice. "I twisted my ankle getting out of the car. It slid into a ditch and I had to climb up the embankment." Zach frowned. "We should get that looked at. There's an urgent care center in town." No, Phoebe protested. "I just need to get to a phone." "My driver can come get me." "Your driver?" Zach couldn't keep the surprise from his voice. Phoebe seemed to realize her slip. "I mean, my assistant. I was on my way back from a business meeting when my GPS directed me through this back road." She glanced out at the rural highway. Clearly not the best route. Zach's curiosity was piqued, but he didn't pry. Rich people had their quirks, and it wasn't his business. He focused on driving carefully through the storm. 10 minutes later, they pulled into the parking lot of the small apartment complex where Zach and Emma lived. It wasn't much a 2-bedroom unit in a building that had seen better days, but it was home. "I can call someone for you from inside," Zach offered, turning off the engine. "The storm's getting worse. You can wait here until your assistant comes." Phoebe looked at the modest apartment building, then at the rain still hammering down. "Thank you. That would be very kind." Emma had fallen asleep during the drive, her head lolling to one side. Zach carefully unbuckled her and lifted her into his arms. "Can you make it with your ankle?" He asked Phoebe. She nodded, but when she stood, she stumbled slightly. Without thinking, Zach shifted Emma to one arm and offered Phoebe his other for support. "Thank you," she murmured, gripping his forearm. Her hand was cold from the rain, but her touch sent an unexpected warmth through him. They made their way slowly up to the second-floor apartment, Phoebe leaning on him more heavily than she probably wanted to admit. By the time they reached his door, Zach could feel her shivering. "Let me get Emma settled, and I'll find you something dry to wear," he said, as he unlocked the door. The apartment was clean but sparse. A worn couch faced a small TV, and the kitchen table was covered with Emma's drawings and school papers. A few framed photos hung on the walls. Emma as a baby, Zach with his arm around a smiling woman who shared Emma's eyes. Zach carried Emma to her room and gently laid her on her bed, pulling off her shoes before covering her with a blanket. She stirred but didn't wake. He kissed her forehead before returning to the living room. Phoebe stood awkwardly in the entryway, trying not to drip on the floor. "Bathroom's through there," Zach said, pointing. "Let me find you something dry." He rummaged through his drawers, eventually pulling out a clean t-shirt and a pair of sweatpants with a drawstring waist. He knocked softly on the bathroom door and handed them to her when she opened it. While she changed, Zach put on a pot of coffee and checked the cupboards. As he'd feared, they were nearly empty. Some pasta, a box of mac and cheese, half a loaf of bread. Payday couldn't come soon enough. Phoebe emerged from the bathroom looking very different. Without her expensive coat and with her hair pulled back in a damp ponytail, wearing his oversized clothes, she could have been anyone, not someone who had a driver on call. But there was something about the way she carried herself, an innate confidence, that gave her away. "The clothes are a little big," she said with a small smile. "But they're warm, thank you." "Coffee," Zach offered. "That would be wonderful." He poured 2 mugs and handed one to her. "The phone's on the wall in the kitchen. Feel free." Phoebe nodded and went to make her call while Zach tried not to listen in. He heard her speaking quietly, occasional words like accident and fine drifting over. After a few minutes, she returned to the living room. "My assistant will be here in about an hour," she said. "I hope that's not imposing too much." "Not at all," Zach assured her. "How's your ankle?" "Throbbing," she admitted, "but I don't think it's serious." "Let me take a look," he offered. "I have some first aid training from the construction site." Phoebe hesitated, then nodded, sitting on the couch and extending her leg. Zach knelt and carefully examined her ankle, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. It was swollen but not severely. "Probably just a sprain," he said. "I'll get you some ice." As he wrapped ice in a towel, he could feel Phoebe watching him. When he returned and placed the makeshift ice pack on her ankle, she asked, "What kind of construction do you do?" "Commercial, mostly. I'm on a crew building the new shopping center on the edge of town." He shrugged. "It pays the bills, mostly." "And you work at a gas station too?" she asked, clearly having picked up on his earlier comment to Emma. Zach nodded. 3 nights a week and weekends. Emma stays with my neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, when I'm working nights." "That must be hard, juggling 2 jobs and raising a daughter on your own." Zach looked toward Emma's room. "It's not easy," he admitted, "but Emma's worth it." "Your wife?" Phoebe asked hesitantly, glancing at the photos on the wall. "She died when Emma was 2, cancer." The word still felt like broken glass in his mouth. "I'm so sorry," Phoebe said, and Zach could tell she meant it. "It's been 3 years," he said. "We're managing." They sat in silence for a moment, sipping their coffee. Finally, Phoebe spoke again. "May I ask you something?" Zach nodded. "Why did you stop for me tonight? It was late, raining, you had your daughter with you. Most people would have kept driving." Zach considered the question. "I guess because I know what it's like to need help," he said finally. "After Laura, my wife, died, I was a mess. I couldn't work, couldn't function. We almost lost everything, but people helped us, neighbors, friends, even strangers sometimes. I promised myself I'd pay it forward when I could." Phoebe's eyes softened. That's really remarkable." Zach felt self-conscious under her gaze. "It's just basic human decency." "In my experience," Phoebe said quietly, "basic human decency isn't all that common." Before Zach could respond, a soft knock came at the door. Phoebe looked surprised. "That can't be my assistant already." Zach went to the door and found Mrs. Rodriguez, his elderly neighbor, standing there in her robe. "Zach, I saw your lights on. Is everything okay? You're usually asleep by now." "Everything's fine, Mrs. R. I picked up someone stranded in the storm. Her ride will be here soon." Mrs. Rodriguez peered around him curiously. Her eyes widened when she saw Phoebe. "Oh, well, that's very nice of you, Zach. Always the gentleman." She lowered her voice to a stage whisper. "She's very pretty." Zach felt his face heat up. "Can I get you anything, Mrs. R? Cup of coffee?" No, just checking in. You know me, always nosy." She patted his arm. "I'll see you in the morning. Bring Emma over for breakfast if you'd like." After she left, Zach returned to the living room, slightly embarrassed. "Sorry about that. Mrs. Rodriguez takes her neighborhood watch duties very seriously." Phoebe was smiling. "She seems sweet." "It's nice that you have good neighbors. Mrs. Artiquette's the best. She watches Emma whenever I need help, hardly lets me pay her. Says Emma reminds her of her granddaughter in Arizona." They fell into easy conversation after that. Zach learned that Phoebe was 34, never married, and worked in finance, though she was vague about details. He told her about his construction projects, about Emma's kindergarten adventures, about his dreams of someday starting his own contracting business. "Why haven't you?" she asked. "Money," he said simply. "Starting a business takes capital. Between the medical bills from Laura's illness and keeping us afloat, there's not much left for saving. But you have experience, skills." Zach nodded. "I've been in construction since I was 18. Worked my way up from laborer to foreman before." He trailed off. "After Laura died, I kind of fell apart, lost my foreman position. I'm working my way back up, but it's slow." "What would you need to start your own company?" Phoebe asked, her expression thoughtful. "Equipment, licenses, insurance, marketing, probably $50,000 minimum to do it properly." He laughed without humor. "Might as well be $1 million. Phoebe opened her mouth to respond, but was interrupted by Zach's phone ringing. He answered to hear a man with a formal tone asking for Miss Zanetti. "She's here," Zach confirmed. "You're downstairs." "Yes, sir, in the parking lot. I'll bring her down." He hung up and turned to Phoebe. "Your ride's here." Was it his imagination, or did she look disappointed? "I should change back into my clothes," she said, rising carefully from the couch. "Keep those," Zach said. "You can return them another time. Your coat should be dry enough to wear home." Phoebe disappeared into the bathroom and emerged a few minutes later, wearing her still damp coat over his clothes, her wet outfit folded neatly in her arms. "Thank you for everything, Zach," she said as they stood at his door. "Most people wouldn't have been so kind to a stranger." "Anyone would have done the same," he said, though they both knew that wasn't true. "May I?" Phoebe hesitated. "May I have your number, to arrange returning your clothes?" Zach jotted his number on a scrap of paper torn from one of Emma's drawing pads. Their fingers brushed as he handed it to her, and again he felt that strange warmth. "Goodbye, Zach Bennett," she said softly. "Thank you for being my good Samaritan tonight." He helped her down the stairs, supporting her as she limped. In the parking lot, a sleek black SUV waited, its engine purring. A man in a suit jumped out and opened the back door as they approached. "Miss Zanetti," he said with obvious relief. "Are you all right? We've been worried sick." "I'm fine, Marcus. Just a twisted ankle. This gentleman rescued me." Marcus turned to Zach with new respect. "Thank you, sir. If there's anything we can do, no need," Zach said quickly. "Just glad I could help." As Phoebe climbed into the SUV, she turned back to look at him one more time. "Goodbye, Zach," she said again, and then the door closed and the vehicle pulled away into the night. Zach stood in the rain for a moment, watching until the taillights disappeared around the corner. Then he shook his head at himself and went back upstairs. He checked on Emma, still sleeping peacefully, before crawling into his own bed. As he drifted off to sleep, he found himself wondering if he would ever see Phoebe Zanetti again. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having moved on during the night. Zach got Emma ready for school, dropping her off at Mrs. Rodriguez's for breakfast as invited. "So, that woman last night," Mrs. Rodriguez began as Emma happily munched on pancakes. She seemed nice. She was just someone who needed help, Mrs. Zach said, sipping the coffee she'd pressed into his hands. Hum, the older woman hummed skeptically. The way she looked at you didn't seem like just someone to me. Zach rolled his eyes good-naturedly. Don't start matchmaking, I have to get to work. I'll pick Emma up from school. My shift at the gas station doesn't start until 7 tonight. The construction site was buzzing with activity when Zach arrived. He threw himself into his work, trying not to think about Phoebe. It was ridiculous to dwell on a chance encounter with a woman so clearly out of his league. Around noon, his foreman called him over. Bennett, there's someone asking for you at the site office. Confused, Zach made his way to the trailer that served as their office. Standing outside, leaning on a sleek cane, was Phoebe Zanetti. Gone were his borrowed clothes, replaced by a tailored pantsuit that probably cost more than his monthly rent. Her dark hair was pulled back in an elegant twist, and she wore sunglasses despite the overcast day. Phoebe, he said, unable to keep the surprise from his voice. What are you doing here? She smiled, removing her sunglasses. Hello, Zach. I hope you don't mind my tracking you down. I asked about construction crews working on the new shopping center. Is everything okay? Your ankle? Just a sprain, as you thought. The doctor gave me this. She tapped the cane. I'm supposed to stay off it as much as possible for a few days. You didn't have to come all the way out here to tell me that. I didn't, she agreed. I came because I have a proposition for you. Zach raised his eyebrows. A proposition? Could we go somewhere to talk? It's a bit difficult standing here. Zach glanced at his foreman, who nodded permission. Sure, there's a diner across the street. The diner was quiet, the lunch rush not having started yet. They settled into a booth, and a waitress immediately brought coffee. So, Zach said after they'd ordered, what's this proposition? Phoebe took a deep breath. I wasn't entirely forthcoming last night about what I do. I'm not just in finance. I'm the CEO of Zanetti Investments. Zach blinked. Zanetti Investments was one of the largest venture capital firms on the West Coast. He'd read about them funding the tech campus being built in the city. You're that Zanetti, she nodded. I was driving back from a potential investment meeting last night when the storm hit. So you're, what? A millionaire? Zach asked, feeling suddenly out of his depth. Billionaire, technically, she said matter-of-factly, but that's not important. What's important is that I think you and I could help each other. I don't understand. My company has a foundation that provides startup capital to promising entrepreneurs, particularly those from underserved communities or facing personal hardships. Zach's mind raced to catch up. And you're saying? I'm saying that I'd like to offer you a grant to start your contracting business. Zach stared at her. Because I gave you a ride in a rainstorm. Because you're clearly skilled, hardworking, and trustworthy. And yes, because you showed kindness to a stranger when you had every reason not to. I can't accept charity, Zach said, his pride stiffening his spine. It's not charity, Phoebe countered. It's an investment. The foundation takes a small percentage of profits for 5 years, which then goes back into the fund to help others. After that, the business is entirely yours. Zach shook his head. This feels, I don't know, too convenient. Phoebe's expression softened. Zach, part of my job is recognizing potential. Last night, in just a few hours, I learned that you're reliable, honest, skilled in your trade, and determined to provide for your daughter despite significant challenges. Those are exactly the qualities we look for. When Zach still looked skeptical, she added, think of it this way, if our positions were reversed and you had the means to help me start over, wouldn't you? That gave him pause. She was right, he would have helped if he could. How would this work? He asked finally. You'd submit a formal business plan to the foundation. If approved, and I have considerable influence in that process, you'd receive funding in stages, with regular check-ins to ensure everything's on track. And what's in it for you personally? Zach asked, searching her face. Phoebe smiled slightly. Besides the satisfaction of helping someone deserving, nothing, except perhaps, she hesitated, Perhaps the chance to get to know you better, if you'd be open to that. Zach felt heat rise to his face. You mean like? Like dinner, she said, to start. For the first time in 3 years, Zach felt a flutter of something he'd thought long-dead attraction, possibility, hope. I'd have to bring Emma, he said. I don't have a sitter for non-work nights. I'd love to get to know Emma better too, Phoebe said sincerely. She seems like an amazing little girl. Zach studied her, trying to find any hint of deception or ulterior motive, but all he saw was genuine interest and something else, a loneliness that mirrored his own. One dinner, he agreed, and I'll think about the business proposal. Phoebe's smile lit up her face. That's all I ask. That dinner turned into another and another. Zach was initially wary of introducing someone new into Emma's life, but his daughter took to Phoebe immediately, especially when she discovered Phoebe could draw horses way better than Daddy. Despite his initial reservations, Zach submitted a business plan to the Zanetti Foundation. It was approved with minor revisions, and by summer, Bennett Contracting was officially in business. Zach started small, with residential renovations, but quickly built a reputation for quality work and fair pricing. Phoebe was careful not to interfere with the business operations, though she was always willing to offer advice when asked. What surprised Zach most was how easily she fit into their modest lifestyle. Despite her wealth, she seemed genuinely content sitting on his second-hand couch, helping Emma with her homework, or eating takeout pizza on Friday movie nights. Don't you miss your mansion or whatever? Zach asked one evening as they washed dishes side by side, Emma already tucked into bed. Phoebe looked thoughtful. I have a nice house, yes, but it's just a house. This, she gestured around his small kitchen, feels more like a home than any place I've lived in years. Because of the charming 1970s linoleum, he joked. Because of the people, she said simply. Because it's filled with love. Zach set down the dish towel and turned to face her. They'd been dating for 4 months, and while they'd shared kisses and held hands, he'd been careful to take things slowly, mindful of Emma. I am falling in love with you, he said quietly, and it scares the hell out of me. Phoebe's eyes widened. Why does it scare you? Because you could have anyone, because our worlds are so different, because the last time I loved someone this much, I lost her. Zach, Phoebe said, taking his hands in hers, I don't want anyone else. And yes, we come from different backgrounds, but that doesn't matter to me, as for loss. Her voice softened. None of us are guaranteed tomorrow. That's why today matters so much. He pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. I never thought I'd feel this way again, he murmured. Neither did I, she admitted. I've spent my whole life focused on success, on proving myself in a male-dominated industry. I never made time for relationships. And then you stopped your car in the rain. 6 months into their relationship, Phoebe finally convinced Zach and Emma to visit her home in the hills outside the city. Emma's eyes grew huge as they drove through the security gates and up the winding driveway. You live in a castle, she exclaimed as the house came into view. It wasn't actually a castle, but the sprawling modern mansion with its floor-to-ceiling windows and infinity pool certainly seemed like one to a 6-year-old. It's a big house for just one person, Phoebe acknowledged. That's why I'm hardly ever here. The interior was beautiful but surprisingly warm, comfortable furniture, colorful art, bookshelves overflowing with well-read volumes. It wasn't the cold, museum-like space Zach had imagined. That evening, after Emma had exhausted herself exploring the grounds and was fast asleep in one of the guest rooms, Zach and Phoebe sat on the terrace overlooking the twinkling lights of the city below. Your business is doing well, Phoebe observed. 3 employees already, and that contract with the school district is impressive. Zach nodded. It's going better than I dared hope. I've been thinking about buying a house, something with a yard for Emma. That sounds wonderful, Phoebe said, though he detected a note of something in her voice hesitation, perhaps. What's wrong? She turned to face him. Nothing's wrong, I've been thinking too, about the future. Zach's heart rate picked up. What about it? "I love you, Zach." "I love Emma. These past 9 months have been the happiest of my life." "But," he prompted, sensing there was more. "But nothing," she said, smiling. "I want to be with you to build a life together, if that's what you want too." Relief flooded through him. "It is more than anything." He took her hand. "But I need you to understand something. I'll never be comfortable living off your money. I need to provide for my family myself." "I know that about you, and it's one of the things I love most," Phoebe assured him. "I'd never ask you to give up your independence or your pride. We can figure out the details together." And they did. Over the next year, Bennett Contracting continued to grow, securing larger projects and adding more employees. Zach bought a modest 4-bedroom house in a good school district, with a backyard for Emma and a workshop for himself. Phoebe kept her mansion, but spent most nights at their house, gradually moving her favorite books and clothes into the master bedroom. Emma, now 7, thrived with the stability and love surrounding her. She adored Phoebe, who never tried to replace Laura in her life, but created her own special relationship with the little girl. On the anniversary of the night they met, Zach took Phoebe back to the stretch of highway where he'd found her stranded in the rain. He pulled over at approximately the same spot. "What are we doing here?" Phoebe asked, confused. "I wanted to bring you back to where our story began," Zach said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small velvet box. "A year and a half ago, I stopped to help a stranger, never imagining she'd change my life completely." Phoebe's eyes filled with tears as he opened the box, revealing a modest but beautiful diamond ring. "This isn't about your money or my pride," he continued. "It's about the fact that I love you, and Emma loves you, and we want you to be part of our family officially. Phoebe Zanetti, will you marry me?" "Yes," she whispered, pulling him into a kiss before he could even put the ring on her finger. 1,000 times yes." They were married 6 months later in a small ceremony in the backyard of their home. Emma served as flower girl, beaming with pride as she watched her dad and Phoebe exchange vows under an arbor he'd built with his own hands. "At the reception, Mrs. Rodriguez nudged Zach as he watched Phoebe dancing with Emma. "I told you she looked at you differently that night," the older woman said smugly. Zach laughed. "Yes, you did. I should have listened to you sooner." "Pa," Mrs. Rodriguez waved her hand dismissively. "You got there in the end." "That's what matters." As the sun set, casting golden light across their gathered friends and family, Phoebe made her way back to Zach's side, slipping her hand into his. "Happy?" he asked, squeezing her fingers. "Completely," she said, resting her head on his shoulder. "You know, most people think I saved you by investing in your business, but the truth is you saved me that night. How do you figure that?" "I was so focused on success, on my company, that I'd forgotten how to actually live," she explained. "You and Emma showed me what really matters. You gave me a family, a home." Across the yard, Emma was showing off her cartwheel skills to a group of admiring adults. She caught sight of them watching and waved enthusiastically. "We've come a long way from that rainy night," Zach mused. "And we have so much further to go," Phoebe replied, a hint of excitement in her voice. "Together." 2 years later, their family grew with the birth of twins, a boy and a girl. Emma, now 9, took her role as big sister very seriously, proudly helping with feedings and diaper changes. Bennett Contracting had expanded to become one of the most respected construction firms in the region, known for quality work and for providing opportunities to those who needed second chances. Zach hired several single parents, arranging flexible schedules similar to what he'd once needed himself. Phoebe continued her work with Zanetti Investments, but scaled back her hours to spend more time with her family. She channeled her business expertise into expanding the foundation, creating more opportunities for entrepreneurs facing personal hardships. On the 5th anniversary of the night they met, they returned once more to that stretch of highway, this time with all 3 children in the backseat of a much newer, safer family SUV. "Why are we stopping here, Dad?" Emma asked, now old enough to be curious about the significance. Zach and Phoebe exchanged smiles. "This is where our story began," Phoebe explained. "Where your dad stopped to help me when my car went off the road." "In the pouring rain," Zach added. "With you asleep in the back seat," Phoebe continued, looking at Emma in the rearview mirror. "So this is, like, your special place?" Emma asked, wrinkling her nose. "It's not much to look at," Zach admitted, surveying the ordinary stretch of rural highway. "But sometimes the most important moments happen in the most ordinary places. Like when Daddy saved the pretty lady," Emma said, repeating the story she'd heard many times. "Exactly," Phoebe said, reaching across to take Zach's hand. "When your daddy saved the pretty lady." Zach squeezed her hand, thinking about all they'd built together. A business, a home, a family. All because he'd stopped his car on a rainy night to help a stranger. "You know what I think?" he said softly. "I think maybe we saved each other." And as they drove away, back toward their home and their future, Zach Bennett no longer struggling, but still the same kind-hearted man who'd stopped to help a stranger knew that sometimes the greatest journeys began with the simplest acts of kindness.